All right, this is Block 7, The Greatest Generation, Section 2, Rise of the Dictators, with the section starting the German Withdrawal from the League. One of the first things that Hitler did when he became Chancellor of Germany was took Germany out of the League of Nations. Germany had been permitted to join the League of Nations in the 1920s, but Hitler was so against the Treaty of Versailles, he campaigned against the Treaty of Versailles. He thought the League of Nations was a British-German, set up to keep Germany down. And one of the first things he did when he was Chancellor was he took Germany out of the League of Nations. And then, in violation of the Treaty of Versailles, he begins to rearm. Germany was only allowed to have a very small military with very limited amounts of weapons and things like that. And in 1933, Hitler leaves the League of Nations, says, "I am no longer bound by League of Nations rules," and Germany begins to build a larger army than it was permitted by the League of Nations. The League, although Germany is in clear violation of its responsibilities under the treaty, does nothing. In 1936, Mussolini and Hitler formed an alliance. It was known as the Rome-Berlin Axis because that's the capital of the two states involved, Germany and Italy. And Mussolini and Hitler signed a treaty of mutual defense, a treaty of economic cooperation, and it's known as the Rome-Berlin Axis. On the other side of the world, Japan is also starting to chafe at the bit of the League of Nations. Japan, although a victor in World War I, has wider economic and territorial ambitions. It thinks the League of Nations, controlled as it was by the colonial powers Britain and France, is standing in its way, demands greater and greater economic advantages, demands greater and greater military advantages. And in 1934, if you remember back from Block 5, there was all those naval agreements. In 1934, Japan canceled all of those naval agreements that restricted the number and size of its battleships. It began to build enormous battleships, including this one. This is the Yamato, which will, when it's completed in 1940, be the largest battleship the world would ever see. In obvious, direct contradiction to all the treaties that Japan went and signed. In 1935, a year after it had left the naval agreements, in 1935, Japan leaves the League of Nations over League criticism of its policies in China. Being on the outside of the League structure, Japan went and looked for allies, and it found them in the Rome-Berlin Axis. And Japan signed on, and it became known as the Tripartite Pact, tri meaning three, partite parties, three-party pact, in which Japan allied itself diplomatically, militarily, with Germany and Italy, and it soon became known as the Rome-Berlin-Tokyo Axis. And that's where the term Axis comes from, the Axis powers, Axis army, etc., etc. So by the mid-1930s, kind of, the players who are going to be playing against the structure of the League are already set: Italy, Germany, and Japan.